Hello? I think I might have got it working, although I've now got no camera, so that's another fun bit. Hang on, let me see if I can rectify that. Can anyone hear me? Even if you cannot see me? Brent. Well, half works now because my face isn't here. Hang on. I keep unplugging and plugging my camera in. Oh, steady. Steady. I've also just rebooted my PC, so all the apps that I hide so they don't pop up on stream are now just going to slowly pop up one by one, which is really exciting. So look forward to that. Anyway, how is everyone's day, morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time zone you find yourself in? Hopefully, the audio coming through reasonably clearly. Ever since the first stream where I got the audio wrong, I am paranoid that my audio setup isn't great. So I'll tell you, I'm pretty sure I know why I had all the issues. One of the potential videos that I'm working on involves me making significant changes to my networking setup, and I thought I'd managed to revert them all, and then clearly 10 minutes before the stream started was not enough time to double check all that. So spoiler alert, there's some potentially network, if I can finish the technical content, because it's quite difficult and it might not be enough to actually tell a story on, but there might be some networking stuff coming up which will be fun. But yeah, I following a guide I found on GitHub, I made some arbitrary changes to my registry which I thought would be fine, but it turns out OBS didn't like those. Anyway, it seems to be working now, so that's good. We'll get started in just a second. For anyone who is a channel member, one, thank you very much, and two, I did pay some chap on Fiverr to add to create some custom emotes which you can now use in the stream. So feel free to use those with reckless abandon. They are a fun caricature of my face. But what? Okay, so last week. So I guess a quick recap for anyone joining us for the first time. Building like a hacking toolkit, something that just kind of abstracts over a lot of the low-level shenanigans you have to do when doing the kind of things that I do for fun on my evenings. I'm kind of doing that together with everyone on stream because I thought it'd be fun. And yeah, so last week we... Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. So last week we looked at introspecting memory regions. So we kind of get a dump of all the memory that a process is allocated. We can't do anything with it at the moment, but we can get a. So if I just spin up what we had last week. So I run Notepad. So here you go. This is a list of all the memory regions from Notepad, which I've just started running. So it's the address of the memory region, the size of it, and then the protection. So that's what we did last week. This week, I thought it'd be fun. And actually, last week we spent a lot of time talking about enums, probably more time than I thought we would, but hopefully people found it useful. So what I want to do this week is to actually interact with that. So we're going to try and read and write from a process's memory, and this is sort of like the actual first real bit of functionality that we want. So this will actually be something useful, something that I would actually use. So yeah, yes, it would be a good idea to always back up your registry before making changes. But I mean, who's got the time? Who's got the time? It's much more fun to try and debug it when you've got 100 people live all staring at you, wondering why your face hasn't appeared. That's a lot more fun. So. We're going back to the Windows API today, everyone's favourite. The main function that we'll be using today is the read process memory function, which does pretty much what it says on the tin. You give it a handle to a process, and that can be any process. That's not just your process, that's any process. And then you can just read memory from it. So this just allows you to arbitrarily read memory from any running process that you have permission to interact with, which is nice. It's nice that Windows gives you that, makes things a lot easier. There's also the sister function of that, which is, excuse me if it overloads, write process memory, which does pretty much what you expect that to do. That allows you to write into another processor's memory. So by using these two and combining these, we can start to interact with other processes on our box. For some reason the docs aren't loading for me, but that's fine. That could just be my terrible network settings. So as always, I think it's kind of worth just diving through the documentation. There might be something interesting there, some sort of caveat, something that we kind of, need to make sure we pay attention to try and use this as safely as possible. So read process memory takes in a handle to the process, the base address, so that is the address that you wish to read from, a buffer, which is the buffer you want to read into, the number of bytes you want to read into that buffer, and then an out pointer which tells you how many bytes it actually wrote. I believe this last one can be null if you don't care about it. And then if the function succeeds, the return value is non-zero. If the function fails, the return value is 0. So it's also classic Windows. It says it's a bool, but actually it's a number. What are you going to do? So, here, my page is fine loaded. And write process memory is pretty much the exact same thing, but it just does the write rather than read. So you give it a buffer, well, it's a const buffer this time, to some data and the size, and then it will write that many bytes into this address. So that's what we're going to do today. So, I guess the first question is so we're just going to, it kind of sounds like we just want to call these two functions, but I suspect, as always, there's going to be a little bit more to it than that, because I'm kind of interested in the design and the API design and how we actually make this usable and user-friendly. So the first question is, where do we stick this? So we have a process object, and that gives you a bunch of, and you can say, hey, give me all the memory regions from that, and that gives you a memory region class. And this is just a wrapper around the address, the size, and the protection. So I guess my initial thoughts would be that the memory region should own the functionality for reading and writing. And I think on the surface of it, that kind of makes sense. This is a view onto some memory in a process, and through this view, we will interact with it. However, the problem I foresee with this in terms of design is that it's this argument here. It's going to want a handle to the process, which we already store in our process object. So it kind of means that we have to muddy the implementation and the construction of memory region to pass in that handle. There's a couple of ways around this if we wanted to put it in there. We could just have another constructor which passes that in. But I know now when we want to port this to Linux, then that concept of a process handle won't exist. So then we'll have a constructor which we can't use on Linux. And then to solve that, we could either use hash defines to just say, have this one on Windows and have this one on Linux, which I hate, by the way, and I will not be doing. Or we could then subclass it, so we could then have an abstract memory region with a Linux and a Windows concrete implementation. And there's a couple of other things, but it's all starting to sound quite messy before we've even started. So what I think I'm going to do is actually have process itself own this, and just to kind of get us going. So what I think we want is something like std vector std uint8t read, and this will take a const memory region like this. So we the flow then is we construct our process, we get a dump of all the memory regions, and then we can say, hey, this one, I like the look of this one, can you please read it for me? So I think that's kind of how we're going to start with. Might not be the best, but I think it's actually, in terms of flexibility where we are now, I think it's probably the right choice. And then kind of conversely for that, I think we'll also want then a void write, which again takes the const memory region, and this will take, let's make it a span of bytes. So this could be anything which sorry, I just finished typing out, but yeah, any contiguous series of bytes. We could possibly use a range, but then we might have to template it. So I think this is flexible enough for us to start with. As always, if what I'm saying doesn't make any sense, please write a comment, and I will endeavour to clarify what it is I'm chatting about. So let's start writing some code. Let's start bringing these across into our process class. So read is part of process, and write is also in process. Format that. Okay, where are we? So read will want a vector of uint 8t's equals the mem, and this will be the size of region dot. I think we call it size, and this will return mem. And then before we get to the return, we want to fill it. So if read process memory, and then here, because we now have access to the handle as a member of this class, region dot address. I don't think that'll work. I think that'll need a cast, and then mem dot size, and then I think we said the last one could be a null pointer, and then if that equals 0, which means it failed, then we'll just be like throw std runtime error failed to read memory region. Region. Right, let's just see if that blends before we get going. I think there's an error in there somewhere. Cannot convert uint pointer to LCP void. Yes, you are correct. You cannot do that. So let's reinterpret cast that to a void pointer. I really like the way VS Code deletes the first keyword that I already had. It's really helpful. I've got a lot of other stuff now. Oh, okay. Of course, this is because I have all warnings as errors, and it's warning me that I've declared these methods and I've not implemented them yet. Can this library be ported to a driver in case rings error is needed? I've not actually considered that. What I suspect we would do in that case is that's a really good point. I'm just trying to think what the best way to do it is. It'd either be a separate library that is built for running in kernel, because I think you'd have to do that if you wanted to do that on Linux, or I guess the answer is that I don't know, because I haven't planned that far ahead. I guess we'll burn that bridge when we come to it. But yeah, it might be fun. I think what a lot of this is going to be done is driven by use case. So if there is a use case for that, then I'll figure out how to do it and add it to it. So if we could kind of construct even a contrived example where we need it, then it's kind of easy to program against that. How many hours a day do I code? Not a huge amount, I'd say. Like I have a job as a software engineer, but I also do quite a lot of training as part of that. So the amount of code I write in a day varies. Sometimes it could be 8+ hours. Sometimes it could be not as many because I'm teaching and talking about code. It really depends what I'm doing. And then I also, so I have a family, and then I have a job, and then the time I have in the evenings is when I tend to do coding, working on, I was working on a game engine for a bit. Now I do a lot of like video game reverse engineering, which is not actually that much coding. So I don't know, a couple of hours maybe a day on that. I wouldn't say like loads and loads. So now we want to write the memory. So if we don't, we don't need to declare any buffer or anything because we already have that. If write process memory, I've already got my handle, and then I'm going to need to do this dance again. Reinterpret cast void star, and then region dot address, and then I think it's going to be pretty much the same. It's going to be data dot data, and then data dot size, and then if that equals 0, then throw std runtime error and a failed to write memory region. Failed to write memory. Sounds good enough. Right, see if that blends. will AI take my job? I use Copilot. It's pretty good. I wouldn't say it's anywhere close to being able to replace like the creativity and the actual problem solving skills. But I think it could be the next Stack Overflow, right? It could be the next thing that people just use to ask like questions that they just cannot remember, because I cannot commit every single nuance and facet of a language and its syntax and its intricacies to memory. So you need a good resource to look that up, and that might be just asking that conversationally rather than finding a post where someone's already asked it. That's where I think it's going. What advice would I give someone trying to learn C or C++? I'd say learn C or C++. Pick whichever one. But they're two separate languages, and they have different ways of programming. They have different idioms and paradigms and different best practices. So it's kind of good to separate those in your head and then just pick one. And then I'd say pick both, right? Pick one, play around with it, see what you like, see what you don't like. Pick another one, have a play around, see what you like, see what you don't like, and then compare and contrast the two. I've done some C, mainly quite a while ago, and for the overlapping problems that they solve, I prefer C++. But again, they're just tools, right? They're just used to be used to solve problems. So it's whatever the right tool for the right job is. That wasn't actually any concrete advice on how to do it, by the way. That was just me. I realised just rambling on about the difference between the two languages. I think just the best way to learn anything is just to write lots of code. Like find a project, Google beginner projects or intermediate projects or whatever level you're at. Write a load of code, and then after you've written it, like come back the next day and reflect on it and have a look and be like, hey, what did I not understand? What did I have to copy from Stack Overflow? What did I find difficult? What could have been easier? And then like write it again using all the lessons you learned, and then reflect on it again, and then kind of iterate on it, and then get bored and do it again with another project. But each time, like take the lessons that you've learned forward. I think that's just the best way of learning. I have a bug. Well, actually, it's not even a bug. I have a compile error. What have I done wrong? Function does not take 4 arguments. Does it? Oh, yeah, of course, right. You're right. You know what? Compiler, this time, you are right. It doesn't take 4 arguments. It takes 5. Taskbar on the right. Yes, I did this for streaming because when you open it, it doesn't move this code around. So I figured it'd be easier for people to view if the code location was static. And now, because I figured I want to do that, I kind of had to force myself to get used to it. And now I find it very weird if it's on the left. So that's why. Using throwing runtime error a lot. Why do I use those instead of a C+ equivalent of like stood result? This is such a complex, like error handling is such a complex topic. The way I view it is if I cannot meet the post conditions of the function, as in like I could not successfully read the memory, and that is an error. And if I cannot handle it within this scope, like there is no recovery mechanism or no recovery mechanism as part of the API, then in my mind, I have no choice but to throw and let someone else have a chance of recovering it. If this was like try read, for example, which returned like an optional vector, then I wouldn't throw. I'd use stood expected or stood optional or something like that. But because in my mind, the API is it either happens or it doesn't. If it doesn't happen, then that is a bug and I can't recover from it. So I give someone else up the stack a chance to deal with it. So that's kind of my philosophy on it. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it will be consistent. But there might be functions that we have to write at some point which are, like it's not an error for them to fail, in which case we will return using some sort of fundamental type or vocabulary type, a way of indicating to the caller that you asked me to do something and I couldn't do it. It's now up to you what you want to do. Okay, right, so rewrite done. So I guess we're done now. End the stream and I'll cut it up into a video. We should actually try and use this. Let me have a look at... So let's try interacting with Notepad. So I actually have Notepad here, and I've copy and pasted in some text. Apologies if it's not particularly big. Oh, I can embiggen it. It's the Jabberwock poem by Lewis Carroll. I guess the text is irrelevant, so I just wanted something that wasn't Lurimitz and Delors. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and read some text out of this and then write back to it. Now, the important thing to note here is that this is not saved. This is not backed by a real file. So all this text exists within the memory of the process. Somewhere, the Notepad .exe app has allocated a buffer, or several buffers, who knows, and has this data in it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to search through all of its memory regions and try and read each one of them, try and find some text, and then write something back over it. Why do I use std.println instead of cout? So std.println is new, C++ 20 or 23. I think it might be 23. I just find this much easier than streams. One of the things I really hate about teaching C++ is that hello world is what, something like this. And then you have to you have to explain what is a stream operator, what is cout, why do you use this for strings into printing but don't really use it anywhere else or very few places, whereas I think this is just so much simpler, and you get these nice format string arguments which you don't really get in cout. You have to stream std hex into std cout to print it as hex. It's quite old and a bit messy. So I just prefer this. I just think this is much easier, and I like to use all the new toys where possible. Okay, so let's start with, so we're going to loop through the regions, and we need to find, oh, actually, I'll tell you what, that is one thing we do need to add to the memory region object, is ability to be bool test region memory region protection. So I think we want to add because we don't want to try and read or write to a region that's not marked read or writable. So we want to be able to test that as part of the API. So we should be able to say, hey, can you just tell me if this is true for this protected region? Sorry, can you just tell me if this protection is true for this region? So that will be, let's get rid of that, take up valuable screen real estate. Memory region test protection test. What did I call it? Did I call it test? Don't know why I call it test region. Doesn't make any sense. I'll just copy that over because I'm lazy. And then memory region, and then we're going to use the bitwise operators that we declared last time to basically say if this and the supplied protection equals the supplied protection, then that is true in the bit mask. So now back to actual coding, we can say if, so let's drop this for the moment because I don't think we want that anymore. If region dot test protection bio memory region protection read, because we can all these together based on what we did last time, which I'm editing at the moment and will be up hopefully Wednesday as a video of just the technical content. So if that's true, so now we know we have a read writable region, so we can start to read from it. So we can do const auto mem equals proc read region. So that should give us the memory. What have I done? Memory, test protection. Cannot convert this from const. Oh, fool. What a fool. We should make that const. Always make everything const. The compiler will tell you what the error is. It's just sometimes a little bit cryptic about it. Okay, right. Back in business. So what we want to do now is we want to search for a string with. So this will be a vector with all the bytes in it. So I think I'll probably go for some. I'm gonna go for vorpal. Just one. It's a fun word, and two, it appears twice, which means we can then test that any searching we do, we can successfully pick up like multiple words. So let's bring in ranges. And let's try something like if const auto found equals stood ranges. I think there's search. And I'll search in mem for. I think I can just put that straight in there, and then not found dot empty. So if I found it, stood print found. Let's see if this works. Okay. Okay, we didn't find it. Why? I'm pretty sure this should work. This is a range. This is a range, or at least a range-like object. I spelt it right? Ah. About know what this is. I bet, because this is a Windows 32 application, I bet it represents its text as wide strings. So there'll be I bet in memory it actually looks. I bet it actually looks like that. Nope. Okay. What else could it be? Oh. Oh, what? A good question has come in, which allows me a chance to ponder this in the back of my mind. What is the reason for doing the assignment inside of the if and not in the line above? Great question. This is, I can't remember the specific name for it in the standard, but this was introduced in C++ 17, the ability to declare a variable and then use a semicolon and have another expression after it. By doing this, I constrain the scope of found to be just valid within the if statement, so there is no chance that I can accidentally use found outside the if statement if this condition isn't true. So it's just a safety feature. It just constrains the use of the variable to the point where I know it meets some precondition that I set. This is great for optionals, by the way. Like, I use this all the time. Like, if const auto x equals, I don't know, get opt of something, and then do x. And now I know that inside this statement, inside this scope, x is valid, and I can't accidentally use x outside of it. So, just a good question. Just something I kind of got used to after C++ 17 came out. I was thinking about this before I answered that question. Oh, it's because it's got a null byte on the end, hasn't it? And I bet, well, this almost certainly won't have a null byte here. It'll have a space. Const auto needle equals L vorpal, and then I'm going to want, I'm probably going to need to use a span for this, so let's try const auto needle bytes equals reinterpret cast. Got to get another reinterpret cast in there. It'll have to be a const pointer because the text data is itself const, and you can't use reinterpret cast to strip off const. And then let's bring in span. what's the hotkey to delete and move lines around? So this is Vim bindings. So it's DD to pull it and then Shift P to paste it back in. It's just standard Vim bindings. I don't know what the hotkey for doing it in actual Visual Studio or VS Code is. Let's just create one in line, shall we? So let's try stud span. That'll use ctag to deduce the template argument, hopefully. So let's do needle bytes, and then the size will be size of needle minus the size of WHRT. My brackets balanced. See if that blends. Okay, right. Found 6 of them. That's exciting. I'm pretty sure there's only 2 in my text. So Notepad has allocated this multiple times. I guess maybe an undo buffer or some other temporary storage. But what we can say now is we've read memory. Like, we can read the memory of another process. So I'm pretty pleased with that. So I think the next thing we should try and do now is write back to it. Kind of check that we've got it all, a nice big, like, circle of functionality. Oh, that is exciting. Someone has their name is Frumious Bandersnatch from the poem. Isn't that exciting? Yes, this is essentially how Cheat Engine works under the hood. It just reads all the memory regions, and then I almost certainly just uses these Win32 functions under the hood. I guess Cheat Engine kind of takes a snapshot, so you'll dump all the memory, take a snapshot of it, make some change in the game, and then take another snapshot and then diff them, and then by using that you can kind of hone in on where like bits of memory that you care about exist, which we could do with this. So my idea of this is to build lots of little primitives that are kind of simple and self-contained, and then build like useful utilities on top of that by just combining those primitives. So we might end up building something like that. I think when it's a string literal declared in the current context, its size is different. So this will be a array, I suspect, if IntelliSense. Yeah, so, it is a pointer. Okay. That's a good point. Maybe that... Oh, is that a pointer? Interesting. I thought that would be... an array. That's fine. That's a good point. Then which case we can do then is needle size equals... Oh, now which one is this? WCS len. Yeah. And now we can just do... let's actually make that a little bit tidier. We could do needle size minus 1 times size of WHRT. I wonder if that gives us a different number of answers. It'd be interesting if it did. Oh, found more this time. Wasn't expecting that. I thought it was going to be less. But here we go. Okay, all right. So now let's use our primitive to write some data back. So what we can do is we can get the offset to where the text in the region begins. So const auto begin equals stud range. Is it ranges? I think there's a distance in it. Distance. And then from the stud begin of mem to the stud cend of found. I think that's right. So we want the distance between the start of the memory and where we found the byte, or the first byte in this. And you can do this because these should both be effectively pointers into the same array, which is well defined. And then we're going to want to replace this with something. So let's do const auto replace equals Actually, let's make this easier for us, so we don't have to worry about what we did last time. Which RT replace equals L. So let's pick a bit of text the same size, so we don't have to worry about offsets or anything like that. Or so is that deduced? Yeah, nice. Okay, so that's now the right size. And now we can make this no longer const and do std memcopy into mem dot start of that. We're gonna copy into that. Oh wait a minute. Plus begin. The replace point to the replacer array, and then that'd be the size of. So now I can do size of replace because it's an array, and I can do minus size of which are t. And now I think the final piece of the puzzle for this is to do no. Do we stick it? No, we stuck it in process, didn't we? Proc dot write back into the region, and we'll write all of this mem back. It might not re-render after you replace memory. Yes, I'm fully expect that's a really good point. I think someone beat me. You beat me to it. This was going to be a caveat that I was going to discuss. Out by default, like just writing to this buffer, just writing over this memory probably won't cause this to update in real time. But I think if we resize the window, we'll trigger the app to redraw its internal buffers. But let's give it a go. So let's run this. Oh, what have I done? Failed to write memory. What have I done wrong here? Have I got my error conditions wrong? If the function receives, the return value is non-zero. If the function fails, the return value is 0. Okay, so we got that. Oh, wait a minute. I know exactly why this is. It's because when we open the process in the constructor, we only ask for read access to the memory. So we need to then ask for VM write. So it's kind of at the moment there's kind of a limitation of the design that when we construct this process object, we have to ask for every single permission to enable the whole API, which is a little bit overzealous of us, because it might be that we could get away with a less restrictive access, and that might then allow us to pick up more processes. I would like to change this in the future so we could be more declarative. So like, hey, I want a process with the ability to read and write memory, and then internally when you construct it, it's like, all right, I know I now need these permissions, and then possibly like disable access to these functions based on what you kind of declared up front. You could probably do it with concepts. Might be something fun to play around with, but that's a problem for another day. Right now, I want to see if I can write to Notepad. Sure did blend. All right. So if I resize this, oh, I've got a nearly worked, but I've obviously got an offset issue there. Let me see if I can fix that. But I definitely wrote some memory, and only wrote it to the first one. So we now need to go back and one, fix this, and two, make sure we can handle multiple instances of that text in the same region. I think it's really cool as well. I love doing stuff like this because it feels wrong that Windows just lets you do all this, but then it's just code running on your computer, right? You've launched the code, so there's no reason why you can't go and like mess around with it. Who can see my offset issue? Can anyone see it? I go find the needle, get the span, go begin of mem. Oh, hang. I bet that's it. I want to go to the front of the needle, not the back of the needle. Let's try this again. And boom, nailed it. Nice. Love it. So now so what my plan is to get all the functionality working in main, which is exactly not where I want the functionality to be, but get it working, and then we will build a better abstraction to our library, and then get the and then lift and shift all the code into the library, and then finally we'll re-implement main to just use the library. So this will then just collapse down to hopefully just like a few lines of code, but then we'll have a primitive that we can use for finding and replacing memory in the future. So next thing to do now is to basically not stop here. We found, so search will find the first occurrence of this data in this data, and by data I mean range. I think it has to be nope, not going to say that because I'm not sure it's true. It will find the first occurrence of this data in this data. So we need to now loop again and again and again till we don't find any more results, at which point we know we've exhausted all of them. What's the point of replacing words in Notepad? I mean, that's the destination, and we'll a little bit more about the journey. I think it's the fact that we can construct a system and drive the Windows API that allows us to do that, and that will then enable us to do other interesting things in the future. So, for instance, for anyone who's watched the video where I looked into I'm on observation duty, that had an array of memory that I wanted to read. I had to read, modify, them right back, and I wrote all this boilerplate for it. Actually, don't think it was as nice as this because I don't think I used as many ranges. But I wrote all this boilerplate in like one big file. So now by using this, if I was to do another video like that or with a similar end goal, I could just reuse that code. I could just use this library to kind of speed things up a bit. So hopefully that kind of answers your question a bit. Will the stream be available on the channel after? So this comes up a lot. So my current plan is that the live streams in full are available as a member perk after the fact, but I cut up the streams into just the technical content, so they're more like a tutorial, and that will be uploaded in a week or two time for everyone. I kind of feel that's like a fair balance. It just takes a little bit longer for me to edit those up because they take time to do. Not too long because it's just me talking, but I talk a lot, so I've got to cut out all the rubbish. So one of those is already up. I'm currently editing last stream's one, so hopefully that'll be up in the week, and then this will be, I'm hoping by like a week or two delay. Do I have any videos on hooking internal functions? The latest one with Lua, with Balatro, that does hook C functions in the Lua JIT, and I briefly cover it in there. The Wallhacks one covers hooking OpenGL functions specifically, which is slightly different. But in this live stream, we will get to function hooking, and we'll write a library to do function hooking, and then that's when we'll really get into the weeds of it and really see how we hot patch the raw assembly in functions to be able to hook them, and then how we clean that up and deal with that. So yes, I have touched on it in previous videos, but these live streams are a chance for me to kind of go a little bit deeper into some of the technical side, which I hope is interesting for people. Okay, so loop. Let's loop. Let's loop. So we've got all this. It's going to be this that needs to loop. I'm trying to think of the best way of doing this. I think what I want to do is actually create a span around this, and then loop while that mem span is not empty. And then what we can do is on each iteration we can update that span to point to the next region we want to search in, and I think that'll work. Is this possible in Linux? So I would hang around to the end of the stream because that is something I'm going to be discussing after all this. So TBC quite soon. It is all possible on Linux. I'd definitely say that. Yes, if you come from C Sharp, this is probably like doing these kind of iterating things is a lot easier. I really like C Sharp as a language. I really like it. I find it a real joy to write in. But I also quite enjoy doing some of these low level things as well. So that's why we're in C++ at the moment. So if I find it, mem span will equal mem span dot subspan. I think I can just give it the offset and it'll just update it. And then I guess we can X out early if we know. If we don't find anything, then we're done. See if that blends. Yeah, see out hello world. I teach C++, and I'm really looking forward to. So MSVC is probably Microsoft have got some of the best C++ library support at the moment. They've got a big chunk of C++ 23 library, not language, implemented. Once GCC and Clang catch up, then my introduction to C++ will probably just be println rather than cout and just cut out all that rubbish. So let's loop. I think this is right. So I suppose let's check. Let's undo our change and just right. Did I build that or did I run it? I think I. Oh, it's angry. Retry. Oh, thanks. All right. Why is that? What have I done wrong? To be honest, I didn't actually see the assertion. I just clicked off it pretty quick, which is terrible at debugging. Offset out of range of stud subspan. Interesting. Where have I gone wrong then? I must have made a mistake. I really don't know why that's not working. Am I... Oh, hang on, wait a minute. I probably need to actually integrate this mem span a bit more into it, right? Yeah. What fool. Probably actually want to search within the span rather than just the original mem. That's not going to help anyone. And then the mem copy should go over the span. And then begin mem span. Always stressful when you've got 100 people staring at you, wondering why the code doesn't work. But see if sure did run, and nailed it. Right, so we can now find and replace multiple bits of data within a running process. And again, this isn't saved to file. This isn't doing anything with the file system. This is purely just reaching into the bowels of Notepad as it's running and messing around with its memory. Of course, we have also updated it in every region where this text appears, not just the one back in this buffer. So there could have been other ramifications for this, but that is just part of the joy of doing this kind of work. We'll find out later what havoc we wreaked with our own process. Do I have a Discord server? It's something I've been toying with, but it's one of those things where I don't have a huge amount of free time, and anything I do, I want to kind of devote the time needed to it to like curate it and be around and moderate it. So it's kind of in the back of my mind, but I don't think I'm there yet. If I get a bit of Slack time in the future, and I think we've got critical mass, then I might create one. But yeah, it's not something I'm thinking of doing right this second. But I guess, is that something people would be interested in? I think I can. I can start a poll. This is exciting. Never done this before. Do I still want to deal with the fact I found 8 of them? I'm just gonna leave it. I just don't know what those other ones are. What you could do potentially is try one and then see if it updates it, and try another and see if it updates it, and like statistically narrow it down to the specific one you want. But I just for a way to drive this code and this functionality, I'm kind of happy with just absolutely destroying the internals of Notepad. I'm sure it will forgive me. So yeah, there's a good question about people asking for anti-cheat and game hacks. Like, I'm interested in the intellectual challenge in it, but not in enabling people to cheat. I'm very much of the opinion that you shouldn't ruin other people's enjoyment just because you're bad at a game, and I'm pretty bad at most games, so I try and do stuff in isolation, and I don't touch anything that's online or really current at all. That's just my view on it. Also, I feel like I toe the line a little bit sometimes. Like some of the videos might be a little bit of a grey area in terms of like what you should talk about on YouTube. And I think if I had a video that was like, here's how you hack Fortnite, it would probably get a lot of views, but I think it'd be quickly taken down. Okay, so we've got some code, and I don't really like this because it's just a lot of code all in the wrong place. So I think now what we'll try and do is move that into a better place. So my initial thought is we could stick it in here as like a read, write, and then replace, but I want to try and keep the primitives simple. And like not kind of like the single responsibility principle, like process gets you some details about the process and allows you to get the memory regions and read and write them. I think if we start stuffing in more and more here, these classes get quite bloated, and maybe that's not a bad thing. But what I want to do is build small primitives that I can then combine in other code to do a thing. Like, I think reading and writing is the fundamentally sort of lowest level of functionality we want from a process class, and then we want to build on top of that somewhere else. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the process utils file, which we've not probably seen since the first stream. And then I think what I want is something like void replace memory const process const memory region stud span const stud uint 8t find stud span const stud uint 8t replace, and then yeah, let's do it. Let's have a stud optional stud size t num occurrences. Let's go for broke. Equals stud not. So I'll just fix all my typos. Include some other stuff. Optional comes from optional. Span comes from span, and size t obviously comes from c stud def. So what I want this API to be is kind of taking all the stuff we had in main, which I've lost now. Let's bring it back. Take all this chuff and stick it into a freeform function. Stick it into a freeform function, which just, again, takes all the primitives we built so far. It takes a process, a region, it takes some spans into some data, and then optionally we can say limit to the number of occurrences. So by default, if this was empty, it will find and replace all of them, or you can give it a number and it will only do that many of them. So I put this in here because I think that's kind of a useful feature to have. Trying to learn more about low level coming from Python and JavaScript. Again, I think there's so much. I do appreciate it's kind of hard to know where to start. Just trying to think of something that's useful. Just starting in like any compiled language is a really good place to start. C, C++. Like, in fact, actually starting in C and then writing code and then looking at the disassembly is kind of a good way to start seeing how stuff is actually constructed under the hood, and then you can kind of build up from there. Could the same functionality be achieved in C#? Yes, but you would have to use the pinvoke or whatever you want to call it, which is a way of calling down into the native libraries. So you would just be calling these libraries like read process memory, write process memory through C# into the native layer, and then you'd have to do a load of marshalling to make sure your data kind of, like garbage collection pinning and a whole load of other stuff to make sure that the niceties that C# gives you doesn't kind of step in the way. So yeah, it could be, but I think it's, for this specific use case, I think it's actually easier to kind of go down to the, descend to the level at which you are programming against. Rust ? I have absolutely, I've almost zero opinion of Rust because I've not spent the time to actually sit down and look at it yet. So I'm very unopinionated on Rust. It sounds good from what I've read, but I've literally have no experience with it, so I cannot possibly have an opinion on it. The only thing I like about Rust is I know it's const by default, and you have to use the mut keyword, which is what I wish C++ was. That is my entire opinion on Rust. Let's write some code. Drop that off, and I better bring in my includes because I do like to keep them all consistent. Process utils, bring these up, let Clang format tidy it up for me. It will put in the extra new line, which I hate, but what are you going to do? Right. So, I think what we're going to do is just yank the code from main. So that would be from here to here, and then shove that in here. We've changed it from proc to process. Okay, sure. Proc process. Let's go. Yeah, so you don't actually have to run this as admin. It can access any processes running at the same level as it. So if you're admin, you can access admin and below. If you're just a standard user, it will just access user. Windows doesn't stop you from just reading and writing another process's memories. I mean, it's your memory, right? You've launched those. Presumably you have, in theory, launched or given permission for those applications to be launched at some point. So it's your memory. Don't want println anymore. I can go. So I don't need replace anymore because I've got that. I'm going to have to change up some of this because this isn't going to work anymore. In fact, actually, none of this is going to work anymore. So, memspan, why is empty? I think I'm also going to do that in a second. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. So, search in the memspan for, I can just do find now. Alright, so that makes that a lot nicer. And then that all stays the same. And then I need to memcopy in from, what do I memcopy? It's replace dot data and replace dot size. Then write it back, and then update the span. Number occurrences. Right, so let's now add that in. So auto remaining occurrences equals, so if I was given a num occurrences, then it will be the num occurrences. Otherwise, it will be whatever, something massive. Size t max. Okay, and then bring in limits. So it's a red line under max. This won't compile. Does anyone want to hazard a guess why this will not compile? If you know, you know. If you don't know, I will tell you. But I'm just curious if anyone knows why this is not going to work. No, it's not. It's got nothing to do with my code. It's definitely not my code. That is the problem. Oh, someone. Yes, you are absolutely correct. Whoever pointed this out, I can use value or instead. I just sometimes. Yeah, good shout. Let's use that. But it's still not going to work. So yeah, good spot. So I'll just see if I get the error I think I'm going to get before I go on. Not enough arguments for function-like macro invocation of max. So in Windows.h, the Windows header that you have to include to interact with most of the Windows API, they, in their infinite wisdom, created a macro for min and max and made it lowercase. So whenever you include Windows.h and you then use min or max, it will then go and replace it with an implementation of min or max as a macro substitution. So, and I'm not even joking. The way you fix this is you have to do hash define no min max. Be like, can you please not do that terrible thing for me? Oh, I've still got it. Oh, that means I'm somewhere. Where else am I including it? Because you have to find the first include of Windows.h in the translation unit you're compiling. I bet that's it. Yeah, got rid of that. Nice. Yeah, classic. Yeah, it's just a classic gotcha of Windows. That it gets me every time. So now I think what we can do is we can basically say, what am I doing? And while remaining occurrences is greater than 0, and then when every time we find one, we'll decrement remaining occurrences. So that should give us the capability to limit if we want the number of replaces we do, but by default it will be an empty optional, so it'll just do them all. I think we're getting there, but there's definitely going to be some shenanigans around how do we munge our wide strings into this in a nice usable way. I'm just trying to think of what's the best way of doing it. I think what we need, just thinking, because I don't want, as part of my API, I don't want a user to have to worry about like getting something into this form when there are other forms they're more likely to use. I want them to be able to use string literals or string views, and it just works. So we could overload this for those, but I think you can solve this, like all things in life, I think you can probably solve this with templates and ranges. So let's try... Whatever, let's just take this. And so let's try including ranges. So I want this to actually be want these to be ranges, so this will take any range-like object, and then what we'll do is we will then do the conversion into this form for a user. So they can either provide us a span of bytes, or we can take a range-like object. But I think we need to constrain this to be a contiguous range. So we need the ability to be able to turn. We need to make sure that the range is such that it can be turned into a span and then mem copied over, and you can only do that if it's contiguous. So this concept just makes sure that I forget the specifics. I think it means it has to be able to call begin, end, and data on it. Let's see if I can find it. Contiguous range. My internet's a bit slow today, so let's see if that loads. But then what we can now do is we can go const auto find bytes, I guess, equals reinterpret cast const stud uint 8t stud ranges data find. So this will just get us a pointer to the beginning of this range as an array, as a uint 8t pointer. Yeah, so if anyone's interested, contiguous range as a concept, it has to be already the random access range, which has another set of restrictions, and then it requires that it has a data, and only contiguous ranges have you can get to the data pointer. You can get a pointer to the beginning of it. If you tried to get that of a list or a deck or something, it wouldn't make any sense because the elements aren't stored next to each other in memory. Hopefully that makes sense. Apparently chat disconnected and then reconnected. I don't know if anyone noticed. I don't know if anyone's still out there and can hear me. I've had quite a few technical issues today. I could just be talking into the void now. Still here, good, right, that's what I need to know. Right, so now we'll do the same for this. We'll do the same for this. So now I can convert this into a span because I've got a pointer, and what I need to do is let's just figure out the size. Yes, talking into the void pointer. That's exactly how I feel sometimes. So I can just call replace memory, right? Like you can overload. Oh, hang on. You can provide an overload of a template with a non-templated function, and the compiler is like actually cool with that. It'll pick the non-templated one if there's an ambiguity because it considers it a better match. I'm sure there's a language lawyer out there who can confirm that for me, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. If you don't specify template arguments, if you just allow template type deduction and there's an ambiguity, it will pick this one if it finds this as a perfect match rather than trying to deduce it into this. Right, so find bytes stud ranges size of find, so that's the number of elements, and then size of, and then stud ranges, is that range value? range value t, of course. So this is how you get the type of the underlying range out. So if this was a wchar, it would return that, and I get the right size of. I feel it's a little bit verbose, but you know what you're gonna do. And then num occurrences. I mean, I'll see if it blends, but because I've not invoked the template yet, the compiler's not going to be that useful in diagnosing any issues. Okay, right, so what I think we can do now is start tidying up our main to use this, which I've already deleted this, so I think if it's the detection, then I think we can just do bio replace memory proc region. You know what, I already know what we're going to need. Because I've made this mistake before. Just I think we're gonna want to do L vorpal SV and then L vorpal SV. So I've deliberately made this a string view just so I know it matches the range type, because I don't think, even if this was an array, it would decay to a pointer when you pass it into the function. Where's my header file? And I've been bitten by this before. I don't think it would then match this. I'm going to constrain it. I'm going to use a string value first, force it to a string value, so it will definitely look like a range, and it will definitely be a contiguous range. And then I think we've got some time left. Might handle the specific case of passing in string literals, which is probably exactly what we want, a user to do. Hopefully that makes sense. So let's see if this blends. Now that we're calling it, process utils. Oh yeah, that's why you have errors as warnings. Right, so let's see if this now works. Feeling confident. Oh, look at that. Nailed it. That's a much nicer API to use, I think, for a user. But I think what we want to do is now just handle the case where they pass in an actual string literal, so they don't have to worry about this. Like, it's nice that that works, but let's try and make this one step a little better. And I think I'm gonna do the array size deduction trick, which if you've not seen it before, it's kind of interesting. So arrays decay to pointers when you pass them to a function. So you can call a function with an array, and you can specify the type as an array, but it just becomes a pointer under the hood, and it loses all the size information of that array. You literally just get a pointer to the first element, which is why, like lots of C APIs, you pass a pointer and a size, because there's no way of knowing just from the pointer how many bytes there are, or objects or things hanging off the end. What about searching by regex and replacing the match? I think that's a really good point. I think part of my design is because we're building these primitives, like we've got the read and the write. It's kind of easy just to build those out onto it at a later date. I'm not going to go through it now, just because I think we've kind of done a lot of the machinery of it, but I might add that like offline, or maybe we can do like a stream on like regexes and stuff like that. But it's a good question. So I'm going to want, again, provide a specialization of this. I guess partial specialization, because I've got still some arguments I'm not not specifying. Don't care about that anymore. And then this will be right. So if you've not seen this before, this allows you to specify, and this allows you to say you want to accept an array of type T of size n, and then the compiler will automatically, if it's a fixed size array, it will deduce the size here of n. So this is how you can actually pass an array to a function and still have it look like an array on the other side. So I can get the size from this. So now what I can do is, this is now even easier, because I can now call the other templated function I've written, stood span find, and then n-1, because I don't want the null byte. Num occurrences. So the only thing I don't like about this API is that we are effectively saying pass us any array of any type, and we will always strip the last one off. But that's kind of only really valid for strings when we know there's going to be a terminating null byte. If some poor user just happened to create an array on the stack of bytes and passed into it, we would lose the last one. I think the one way we might be able to make this better and it's kind of annoys me that I don't think this exists in the standard, is to have a character concept. Type traits equals stood same as tchar, or it's like loads of them, isn't there? There's loads of them. Remember, char, signed char, and unsigned char are all 3 distinct types. And then isn't there like, let's look it up now. Can't actually remember them all. Right, yeah, so there's char 8t, char 16t. I think tchar is a Windows concept, and I'm pretty sure it's an alias of wchar. Char 32t. I think that's it for now. I'll go back and double check this before I commit it up, and then we can just make sure that this. Oh no, I don't even need to use requires. I think I can just make this a character type T. So I think that will work. So basically say, hey, if you give us an array of characters, we will assume this is a null terminated string. We could probably even like assert or check that there was a null byte on the end, but I'm not too worried about that. I think we're taking it a bit too far at that point. So I think now I can drop these off and just have it as that. Right. Nice. Okay. Nice. Like it. And one last thing I want to check before we wrap up the coding bit is just check that I can just replace one occurrence. Nice. Okay. Okay. I think I'm going to for the coding segment of our evening. I think I'm going to call it there. I'm happy to answer any questions. I want to talk about what's happening next as well. But if anyone's got any questions on what we did, I'm happy to kind of answer them. I wrote quite a lot of code. We did some Windows shenanigans. It's kind of hard, like just going through it in my mind to know where I might lose people. So do ask some questions. I hope you found it fun. For next, so I'm trying to do this weekly where it can kind of fit into my life. What I want to do next week is take a pause on adding any more Windows features, because I want this to be cross-platform. And I know from experience that the longer you leave it before you introduce another OS, the more design decisions you make that are then harder to undo. So I just know we're going to have to refactor a bunch of this. So I think we might take that pain next week and port everything we've got, or at least a good chunk of it, over to Linux. Because I think that'd be really interesting. There's a lot of design decisions we're going to have to revisit and rethink. We're going to re-implement finding memory regions and reading and writing memory in Linux, or as much as we can. And then I think from there we'll try and do features in parallel. So we'll add a new feature to Windows, then we'll add it to Linux. Could you narrow down the memory range of the search by using a static pointer to the text field? I think, if I understand you correctly, you're basically saying that one of the address of that text field will probably exist somewhere as a pointer in memory, and we could search for that address. Yes, but without reverse engineering, I wouldn't know like where that would be or what that would look like, or if that would even be like, a static pointer. So there's definitely something you could do along those lines. I think you'd actually have to kind of pull Notepad apart and kind of delve into the depths of it to find that out. Yes, all this is published for free on GitHub with the Boost license, so anyone's free to use it. I will basically, what I normally do is after the stream, I go back and tidy up the code, add comments, tart it up a bit, and then stick it in the Git hole for anyone who wants access to it. I believe also I still have... Yes, so there's one more thing I want to go over quickly, but are there any questions from today? I'm going to end the poll so I can see the results. I'll post the link here. It's only got obviously last stream's code on it. There's a post somewhere on the community wall with it on. For some reason, my web browser is struggling to load even basic URLs. So, yes. So this is a really good question. I pre-decremented here rather than post-decremented. So I did this rather than this. What's the difference? The difference is that that's typofix highlighter. In theory, this is more efficient because it doesn't have to return a temporary. If you imagine that, because post-decrement, it decrements it, but returns you the old value. So internally, it must create a copy of it. But like a compiler will just, if it knows it's not using it, it will absolutely flatten these down to exactly the same thing. So it's really just a terrible habit that I've picked up. Well, I mean, say terrible habit. It's just how I was taught it when I got my first job, and I've just always done it. It makes absolutely no difference. And anyone who says you should do this because it's more efficient is unlike. I just don't think that's going to be true in like 99% of the time. I think it reads better, like decrement this rather than this decrement, in English. But maybe I'm just grasping at straws to try and justify my terrible habits. I believe also I can, for anyone who's stuck around, gift 5 memberships. So congratulations. YouTube allows me to gift out 10 a month in batches of 5. So thank you very much for coming along. I've rolled the dice and these 5 people got lucky. You have access now for 1 month's membership, which includes access to past live streams and early access to videos and a few behind the scenes posts. But the majority, I'd say like 90% of my stuff is free, available for everyone. I don't really put anything behind a paywall. It tends to be like early access stuff. Cool. But yes, check on my community post page on YouTube. Watch some extra videos while you're there if you want. It should be on there. For some reason, I'm having some real networking issues today. Anyway, I'm going to probably wrap it up there. Thank you everyone for coming along, and I'll try and do this next week.